So not every day is like our best day, but let's think about how we can create more days like that. So with Gallup Science, we've studied tens of millions of employees over the last several years, all around the world in all kinds of industries, workplaces, including education, and a growing number in education, sellout stadiums full of people in education, to really think about what does it look like to be in the workplace, and how can we group people together in different categories and start to think about how we lead workplaces differently. So our research has really been boiled down to say, oversimplifying here, there's three different types of people in the workplace. There's those who are engaged in their job, who are always looking for more. They're the busiest people who can always take on more. They're great employees, and they're psychologically committed to the work they're doing. They have a heart connection to their job. They're proud of being an employee there. Then there's the not engaged employees, which is in the middle, right? So it's about half of most workplaces where they might be satisfied with their job, but it's more of a transactional relationship. I have a job description, I understand what it says, I follow through on everything in there, I get paid twice a month, I retire in 8 years, life's good, you know, and from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, they're sufficient at their job, but they're not necessarily excellent at their job. And they stop at 5, and sometimes the work doesn't stop at 5. And they go home and don't think about work, and I'm not saying you have to be a workaholic, but those who are engaged in their job are always thinking about it, and they make those connections. It's about work-life integration, not work-life balance. And then unfortunately, there's those folks who kind of look down their nose and say, this won't work. They're active in their disengagement. If they were just not engaged, that'd be fine. We could manage that and work our way through. But they're negative, and they're out recruiting additional negativity to join them. And so they're out there and trying to pull other people down with them. So our goal is to figure out how can we move people up a step on that ladder of engagement and have more people having more of their best days every day. When we look at the data around the world, and particularly on this slide around the country, we find that 30% of the US workforce is engaged. And I just described what that looks like. About half, 52%, are in that holding pattern in the middle that are not engaged. And that leaves those 18% who are actively disengaged. Think about the number of employees at your institution or in your school district, and assume you're average. I know you're all better than average. I mean, unfortunately, half of you aren't, because that's how the math works. But anyway, maybe since you're here, you're above average. I don't know. And because you're standing between me and the door. But let's say 18% are actively disengaged. Think about how many employees that is that every day are coming in and potentially making things a little bit worse. Potentially grumbling at a student on the bus before the day's even officially started. You know, potentially hanging up the phone on a student who before all their questions are answered, or potentially not addressing the needs of a student who didn't quite get it that day and who really needs a little additional attention and advice. So we really need to think about the impact one at a time. I love to think about big numbers and big data, but there's faces behind those numbers, and we really need to think one student at a time, the impact we can have to create more Christinas in our future for the good of all of our students. So there's this phenomenon. I've been at Gallup for 14 years, so I'm on the right-hand side. I've been at Gallup more than 10 years, so my engagement's, you know, back up here. But there's this phenomenon about engagement in the workplace. When you start, there's this honeymoon effect. Life's good, right? And maybe I was unemployed, I said yes to the job, maybe I had a couple offers and I chose this one, so that's a good thing. So it's no surprise that we start at the most engaged level. 1 to 3 years in, it starts to tail off. It kind of hangs out down in the bottom at 3 to 5, creeps up a little bit at 5 to 10, and then really starts to recover by the time you're tenured, 10 years or more. Now, in higher education, if we're looking at tenured faculty, there's probably some relief that comes with that milestone, so maybe there's a more immediate bump, a more stated difference there in higher education, or in K-12 if you're a tenured teacher. There's different milestones that probably help drive our engagement, but when I look at this, I think it doesn't have to be this way. I think about what is it about the first day on the job or the first year on the job that's fabulous. Well, my boss took me out for work, told me not to call her a boss, but we're colleagues. They gave me a clear job description and then explain what it really means. So there's the formal one, and then there's the here's what we really expect. People stopped by and built relationships. Somebody invited me over to dinner because they knew I moved here from out of town, and all these kind of moments that matter in our early time in our career. How come we don't do those things 3 to 5 to 10 years with the same intentionality and regularity that we do with those newer employees? So I'd really just encourage you to help us reverse this trend and say that your first day on the job would be your least engaged, and it's just up from there. I think that's possible.